All right. So thank you so much, Brendan, for being here today. And thank you everyone who's watching this recording later. My name is Stephen Klontz. I'm one of the community leaders, I guess, of the PreTeXt community. And Brendan, why don't you introduce yourself real quick?
Hey, I'm Ethan. I'm a assistant professor at Emmanuel College in Boston, and I'm looking to use PreTeXt to write some open educational resources for my classes.
So thank you, Brendan, so much. I should have mentioned I'm associate professor of mathematics here at the University of South Alabama. That's my primary position. And thank you, Brendan, for being with me today. I always like to do these tutorials with an audience. That way, when I say nonsense things, you can call me out on it and clarify. And yeah, so let's just go ahead. I'm going to give the walkthrough. First of all, if I want to get started working with PreTeXt, what do I do? I go to pretextbook.org, or I just Google PreTeXt XML or pre, can't just Google PreTeXt. That's too common of a word, but pretextbook.org is where I would send people to first, or like PreTeXt guide probably will get you to the right place. But if you're going to pretextbook.org to get to the guide, there's a lot of stuff going on here. Go to the documentation, and that very first link is the PreTeXt guide in the documentation. And I think that's where Google's going to send you to. It's going to send you to the documentation page, which will then send you to the guide if you click that top link. So the PreTeXt guide is a very, very long document. Lots of stuff going on. It's written in PreTeXt, of course. What I'm going to talk through today is the introduction. And in fact, I'm not going to talk through all of it. I'm going to start with very briefly the why PreTeXt section. And generally speaking, if you're watching this video, or if you're Brendan, then you've either read this already, or even more likely, you've met somebody in the community that is a big evangelist of PreTeXt and has hopefully sold you. I mean, enough that you're watching the video, you're hanging out with me today, that you are wanting to learn some more. But this is a good resource to kind of get understanding what's the philosophy of PreTeXt, what is source versus output. I'm not going to go through this in detail because it's easy enough to read here. There is something I'd like to point people to, though, who are just getting started, about the PreTeXt principles at the bottom of this philosophy page. It's just 11 short descriptions of what PreTeXt is, and basically anything that seems weird or more difficult, or just not what you're familiar with in terms of writing in PreTeXt versus a different mechanism like a Google document or Microsoft Word or Markdown or anything of those other options. Often it'll always trace back to the PreTeXt principles, and these are things that we go back to very frequently in terms of if we need to make a decision. These are the community principles that we've established for this product. And they have changed over the years. In fact, one of the best changes, I think, is adding this 11th principle, making sure that we center accessibility in PreTeXt. PreTeXt is great for creating interactive documents, but we also produce Braille documents, raised Braille. I have actually with me today an example of on the camera here. I'll stop sharing my screen just to make sure I'm showing it in the recording, of PreTeXt produce Braille diagrams. This is not easy to come up with by default, but we have lots of people in the community who have put a lot of thought into how to make sure that we're helping authors who know nothing about Braille. I mean, basically nothing about Braille, like me, to produce high quality, accessible content. And by writing good PreTeXt, you get that for free. And that's one of our core values. So I'll leave that for folks reading. What I want to talk about is kind of the more technical. Okay, I've bought in, let me get started. What do I do? And so this is the getting started tutorial. And so we're going to use GitHub code spaces to do this. There is, if you're an advanced user, I'm not going to go through this in the video, but we have a section for advanced users. If you like, the example that I've often been given is that, oh, I'm a core Sage Math developer. I really want to run this on the command line and use Vim. And, if you have those sorts of opinions, skip ahead to 2.4. But for most authors that we found, that this GitHub code spaces has recently been our go-to in terms of getting people up and productive quickly without a whole lot of overhead in terms of the technical infrastructure. We're going to create a free GitHub account, or we're going to show how to create a code space, whatever that is. We're going to learn the first steps to editing PreTeXt and converting it into both LaTeX and HTML. And finally, we're going to deploy that HTML to the live web. So this is something you could do in like 20 minutes. Let's get a PreTeXt shareable URL, free all the way through the stack. And we're going to walk through that in this video today. Any questions, Brendan, before I get into it?
No, sounds exciting.
Okay, so first section, GitHub and code spaces. So GitHub, I think a lot of people are at least vaguely familiar with that. Oh, that's where open source software lives. But if you're not a experienced software developer, you might be a little intimidated. Like, what is Git? It's a thing that for many, many years you had to be comfortable with something called the terminal or the command line. And recently there's been some other applications. GitHub has a desktop version, but you still have to install a bunch of different things. We've found a really nice workflow that kind of makes it really easy to get into. I do want to, just for the posterity, you don't have to use GitHub. You don't have to use Git at all to use PreTeXt. There are other services like CoCalc and GitLab, and as I mentioned, Section 2.4 has some advanced pathways to installing things however you want. But this is, again, the recommendation that we're making for new authors as of March 17th, 2023. Happy St. Patrick's Day. So to do this, there are two steps basically to get started with GitHub. I'm going to open this in an incognito mode because I'm already signed into GitHub on my actual web browser. But github.com/signup, it walks you through the process. So it's going to, apparently it's loading kind of slow right now because of my internet connection, perhaps. If I refresh it, maybe it'll show it. It also might be because I'm in incognito mode. Low system resources affecting my audio quality. Is everything sounding okay, Brendan, right now?
I can still hear you pretty well, yeah.
Okay, yeah, I think I have too many things playing at the moment. Give me just a moment. I'm going to pause the recording. Okay, I closed a few windows for the purposes of freeing up some more resources on my computer. Running the Zoom recording, this will slow us down here a bit with me running two other applications I didn't need right now. In any case, now the GitHub signup has showed up. It walks you through it. You enter your email, so on and so forth. It's not a valid email. Make your free account like you do on every other website. The other thing that you want to do, this link won't work unless you're already logged in. But if you're logged in, you can request a discount if you're an educator. Many of the folks in our community are, of course, university faculty or researchers or high school, instructors. Anyone who's working in the education space can get a bunch of free resources, basically free GitHub team, free GitHub classroom, pro level service for GitHub. GitHub does a lot of stuff for free, just period. But if you have a .edu address, you can get even more free. The stuff that the for-profit folks have to pay, they're $7 a month for or whatever. So that's something else I highly recommend doing when you get started. By doing that, let me just put it this way. I have never hit any of the limited allowances GitHub gives me for making repositories and PreTeXt documents, and I make like literally dozens of them every month. And most people are going to just make one. So get the educator discount. It's free, and you won't have to worry about paying for anything for any of this. All right. So the other thing we're going to do is create a code space. Now, this is something, it basically removes the necessity of having to install anything onto your computer. Everything we do today is going to be done through your web browser. It's going to be done while you're logged into GitHub. And if you're like me, I actually do all my software engineering work through GitHub and code spaces, pretty much. And I've been doing web-based stuff, cloud-based stuff for a long time. And it's just really nice for someone like me who doesn't want to have to worry about which computer am I logged into. Have I installed all the right software to get productive on this machine versus my laptop versus this random classroom computer that I'm using right now? Because I do everything through the web, I just can log into my web browser wherever I'm at, and I can get productive very quickly. So it's highly, highly recommended for new users. And again, if you have strong opinions about this, you're probably an advanced user anyway. So feel free to check out section 2.4. What I'm going to do, I'm logged into GitHub. I'm going to go to this github.com/pretextbook/pretext codespace link. This is a one-time process that I'm about to show you right now. It does take a few steps. This is a one-time process, at least one time every time you want to create a new PreTeXt project, a new book in PreTeXt. And so what the instructions tell you to do is to click on this big green button. If you don't like to use dark mode like I do, I don't know where I can change that really quickly. Your view may look different in light mode versus dark mode, but I think it's still a big green button. And you're going to create a new repository using this template. And so this is going to do a lot of the magic Git initial setup stuff that you don't really need to care about. But you're going to create a new project using this template. And so you'd probably want to name it My Great Algebra Book, something like that. And I haven't done that before. I haven't used that title yet, so it's allowing it. You can create a description for visitors. That's optional. The big choice that you may want to consider is public versus private. Everything I show you today can be done whether it's public or private. The big distinction that I would make is that, I mean, private's private. The only person who's ever going to be able to see your code, your actual source of your document is yourself and anybody that you've manually approved to see it. And you might think, oh, of course, that's what I want, because I normally don't want people looking over my shoulder. However, if you want to go get support from the PreTeXt community, it's just a little bit extra roundabout that we all have to do for us to actually see the exact thing that's going on with your project. One of the beauties of GitHub and Codespaces is that we don't have to do any guesswork. We can literally just do exactly what you're doing through our own web browser and help you improve your document, fix your errors, and all of that. You can do that with a private repository, but then you have to, when you're talking to us, you can't just give us the link to the thing and say, hey, this is what I'm trying to do. Why is it broken? You have to say, hey, who can help me? Okay, let me add you as a collaborator. And it slows down the whole process. I always, even no matter how crappy my idea is, and I have lots of the crappy ideas, trust me, I make it public. In practice, I have not found, but I'm also just a very open person. So whatever you're more comfortable doing, do that. You don't have to include all branches and then click that big green button.
I have a quick question about that. I assume it's probably pretty straightforward later to like change it between public and private if I really had a change part about it. But how about that title? If I want to go like change the title later, is that easy to do, or should I spend a bit of time choosing that first?
It is pretty easy to do, and I'll do it because it'll illustrate something cool.
Okay.
I'm gonna go to my settings, and I can just change it right here. That repository name, it's not my great algebra book, it's my greatest algebra book. Obviously, I'm gonna rename it, and now I'm back, and now it's my greatest algebra book. And what's neat is that the old URL, my great algebra book, still works. It'll redirect it and update it. And so
Awesome.
if you call it my great algebra book and then you share that link with others, or they follow it using, like start on GitHub, or they fork it. Yeah, I'll explain what that is. Maybe actually, I don't know if I'll get into that in this video, but yeah, GitHub does a good job of keeping people updated. So don't overthink it too much. You could have called it random parakeet or whatever GitHub suggested. I have so many different PreTeXt books that are just random series of words because GitHub gives you, when I'm testing stuff out and need sample documents, I just pick random words for my name. And I can change them if it needs to be something, semantic, that people can actually understand what it is I'm doing here. I probably should change this to demo just in case I forget this later. So maybe call it demo dash. That way I remember, oh yeah, why did I create this? It's a demo book. So I can delete it later when I'm done. Okay, now that we're here, we've created a code space. And this actually takes a bit of time. Let me go ahead and click the buttons, and then I'll explain to you what those buttons did. So I clicked, so this is going to do some thinking. It's going to set up the code space. I'm going to back up and show you exactly what I did. I went to code, and then, okay, well, it's gone. I went too quickly. There was a big green button here that says create a new code space, something like that. And what that did is it popped up this pop-up, and it's doing some magic. What it's the magic more or less is it's creating a virtual computer in the cloud. Basically, it's a computer that lives on the internet that has PreTeXt and all the other software you need installed. It's building that for you right now. You could just step away, get a cup of coffee. I think it takes about maybe a couple of minutes for it to finish, not very long at all. And this is a one-time process, as I mentioned. And so we can
Is the
sit
idea that
here.
the
Mhm.
sorry, the idea that the advanced users are kind of doing this, but like locally on their own machine, whereas here we're doing it on the cloud?
Exactly right. So you would actually have, it would take you this much time to install it on, maybe not quite this much time, but a good chunk of this time would be spent like typing something called pip install PreTeXt in your command line, and then it downloads some stuff and installs some stuff. And um yeah, that only I have to time this, but I think that was, I felt like only like a minute. It's not
Yeah.
completely done here. You can see that I've got some PreTeXt language popping up on my screen, but if we wait a little while longer, get a little bit patient, it's like activating extensions, we can see down there. We're
Hmm.
eventually in another minute going to have some nice color coding, what we call syntax highlighting of the PreTeXt book. There's this terminal. This is that scary thing that I said where you have to type out stuff like PreTeXt new. But we're not going to actually use that for anything. I'm going to go ahead and just make this really small because I'm not going to use it for a whole much. I might show you here and there. We'll see uh, how things go. But really, you got, okay, so here's, we're using something from Red Hat. Red Hat, it makes a flavor of Linux. You could decide to share your data with them or not, just like you do with many other software things. I'm going to be private with this and say deny giving them usage information. Does not affect one way or the other. Now, okay, I waited long enough, and a few things have happened here. You can see that I've got the nice, pretty syntax highlighting / color coding of the PreTeXt tags. And then the attributes are here in blue. And of course, the actual text that they are authoring is in white. And so it kind of helps you see this kind of like structure of a PreTeXt document. You've got a PreTeXt document. It has some documentation info. It's representing a book. It has a title called My Great Book, a subtitle that's called an example to get you started. Um, what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to go ahead and build this book. What does this actually look like? What am I actually creating? And so to do this, this is where actually, as of recording, the tutorial needs to be updated because we've actually made this much better in terms of the user interface. We had something that it used to live right here in the sidebar. Now there's two different places you can go in order to start building things with PreTeXt. I'm going to point you to, I think most beginners are going to want to use this version of the menu down here, which is this PreTeXt in the footer. Whenever you're editing a PreTeXt project and you have all the magic software that we installed for you magically through GitHub code spaces, you're going to get this little context that says run PreTeXt command. Okay, I clicked it, and now it gives me some choices. I could do a quick build, a build, I could generate assets, I could view, I could deploy, I could do something called terminal mode. I'm not going to do terminal mode, at least not now. I'm just going to do the quick build. And that was pretty darn quick. The build was successful. I want to view that output. Okay. And what that did is the same thing as just going to PreTeXt and clicking view. And I want to use so there's two of these, and the reason why is because they're both a little bit, as of this recording, a little finicky, depending on the web browser you're using, depending on the day, because GitHub is still working, or Microsoft, I should say, is still working on this live preview feature. And right now, I think if I click it, it's going to try to load it, and it's going to be sad. But if we wait just a moment, more, I know you're going to do it. This is why I said it's finicky. It depends on. Oh, that's a shame. I'm going to try this one more time. And this is why there's two versions, because it just is not consistent enough for us, at least not yet. All right. Well, this is why there's two of them at this point. And this is, again, PreTeXt. This is a good time to remind you, PreTeXt is free and open source, is created by volunteers. And we are, as a community, constantly trying to find ways to make the experience better. I'm going to use PreTeXt view command. Since that first one didn't work, I'm going to view the web. That was the default target. And by doing that, it opened up this new tab. And now we've got up here, this is the document that we're building here. I want to point out that this thing did work earlier when I was testing. Well, I can't show you because it closed itself, but anyway. So it just depends. Like an hour ago, it was working, but this view command is the other option. So you have both of them. If one doesn't work, try out the other. And we're going to try to make one solution that just works. And we're still just waiting on upstream improvements to that live preview feature. Any case, since we're doing this, I'm actually going to, on my computer screen, have two web browsers open. So one is going to be the web browser that shows the document, the built web document, and the other is going to be over here. This is going to be the editor. And so, and I can make this a little bit more. Yeah, just enough right there. Okay. So, all right. All's well and good here. Now, what do I want to do? Well, let me just show you some basic edits. What do we call this? Demo my greatest algebra book. So I want to change my title to match Demo my greatest algebra book, the thing I'm actually writing. And of course, typing this did not automatically update the title over here. There are two steps. I need to go down here. Let me make this a little bit, yeah, easier to see. Go to PreTeXt. I need to do another build. So I'm doing quick build because my default target is web. And then I can dismiss that. Now, it still hasn't updated. It's because I need to refresh my browser. Refresh my browser. Now, Demo my greatest algebra book is the new title. An example to get you started with algebra. That's going to change my subtitle as soon as I build in PreTeXt and refresh in my browser. An example to get you started with algebra. One of the reasons why we like PreTeXt is because you write once and that's it. We've defined for this book its title and its subtitle. And that means that no matter what page of the website I go to, you'll notice my title and subtitle are updated on all these different HTML web pages. It's not like you're writing an HTML, like if you've ever written raw HTML, every page you go to, unless you use some sort of framework like PreTeXt, you've got to update the title on every single different page, repeat yourself here and there. You do not repeat yourself if you're writing proper PreTeXt. So, finally, and then I'm going to stop and let you ask questions for clarifications. What I want to do is two things. First of all, you see all these like orange and green files over here. You see this little 9 that's kind of screaming, hey, you need to do something. This is because if you go back over to, and you should take a note of this. I forgot to mention this earlier. When you create your code space, when you generate from the code space, there's this new URL, github.com/your username/ whatever you named your repository. All right, the thing's going to house your book's source. Bookmark that. All right, bookmark that. I'm going to bookmark it on my bookmarks bar. All right, and then now if I want to go back to it, I can go to my bookmarks and I can go back here and I can find it again later. There are ways to get through it through github.com, but this is just feedback I've gotten from new authors that, hey, how do I find that book again? Make a bookmark of it at this point. Not a bad idea. And to get back to your code space, I'm going to close up this code space for a second. I did not save any of my work, by the way. If I refresh, you might go, oh God, what happened to all those files? What happened to my greatest algebra book? I don't see it here. Go back to code. I have this. This is another one of those. GitHub just gives it random words. You can rename it to whatever you want. My awesome code space. That's helpful. All right. And now my code space has a more useful name, perhaps. I don't know. But I'm going to reopen my awesome code space. And doing that, we get back all those files, all my edits. And that, I do not know what GitHub's like cleaning process is for code spaces. It is virtual computer that they're running for you on their servers. They do shut it down for you automatically if you don't like edit for 30 minutes, but you just boot it back up. I do highly recommend whenever you make a sensible change, a change that you like, it's like if you're playing a video game, if it's time to save your game, right? If you're worried that your mom's going to unplug your Nintendo, that's a good point to save your game or save your document in a format more permanent than what is done currently, right? I can close my web browser and open back up, but if I really want to save my game permanently, but reversibly if you want. This is where you go to source control. That little 9 says I've changed 9 files. I can even view a summary of those changes. Most of these changes were like automatic by the code space getting started. And by the way, for posterity, we're using PreTeXt 1.5.1 in March 2027 or 2023. And so yeah, so slight changes here, slight changes to, so we don't even care about most of these files, right? We created this new main file, this new publication file. Pretty much at this stage, it's your first ever actual making a commit. The commit is like you're saving your game, saving your project, not just your document, but your whole project surrounding that document. And you have to name the commit. You need to give a very short explanation. For my first change, I'm just going to say, made a new PreTeXt project. All right, something as simple as that. I like to go ahead and hit this down arrow and do commit and sync. That's a one button solution. If I commit and sync and do that always, and then it tells you what that's doing with some technical pull and push commits, whatever. Okay, don't show me that again. Commit and sync is your friend as the new PreTeXt author. All right. And that went ahead and you saw that all these files, that little badge went away. All that's gone. And now if I go back here and go back to my bookmarked demo greatest algebra book, you can see all those files are now been saved to the public repository. What happens in your code space stays in your code space unless you choose to share it with the public by making a commit. And then that's only if your repository is a public repository. If it's a private repository, then it's only shared with your approved collaborators. Then you can go back to your files. I like to go ahead and close out all my windows every so often because I get confused with all the different stuff going on. And I can go back and open the one I care about and I see I've got this, I've got that. I think that's probably a good place to pause. Any questions so far, Brendan?
Let's see. I think I was just following along with you, and I just did the same commit and sync thing right now. Sure. How do I get back to that main file that you're in right now?
That is a very good question. So if you do the commit and sync and you go back to your file explorer, the main file that you're going to be editing for your project, there's a lot of cruft here. I say cruft, it all has a purpose, obviously. But when you're getting started, the main file you care about is the source folder and the main.ptx file. The default PreTeXt project, this is all configurable, but by default, the entire document that you as an author will be editing is in main.ptx. And as your project gets bigger, there are ways to split this up into multiple files. That's something that I should document someday in a different video. But for now, we're all just going to put everything we're going to edit for our project is going to use default settings, and it's all going to go into this main.ptx file. That's the one text file that pretty much every other commit is going to be touching. I'm pretty sure for the purpose of this video.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
I think so. I think I'm also just still a little unsure about the code spaces. So right. we set that up. Is there ever any reason why I would need to set up another code space, or do I keep going back and opening that one?
You keep going back and opening that one. So okay. let me clarify. This is a good point. Again, thank you so much for being on the call with me today. Sure. There are two things to compare here. There is your repository homepage, github.com/username/whatever you called your repository. Yeah. This is a public website, as long as it's a public repository. And you can send that link to anybody, and they can see, this is what it looks like if you're not logged in, you don't have dark mode enabled, right? They can see all of your source files. They can see that edit demo my greatest algebra book. And they could even, if they were logged in, suggest edits through this simple web interface. This is really cool in terms of an open source educational product, because you can get your community involved and they can make typo changes through the GitHub just by having a GitHub account. They don't have to worry about what the heck a code space is. They can just fix your typos, and I need that all the time. So I love that. That is the repository webpage. Separately, by being logged in, and if you own the repository, you can create a code space that just lives on that repository. You click that, that goes into what's called a VS Code web editor. And that's where you have this virtual computer that can run all sorts of different PreTeXt software and various other software that we use to create a lot of the cool features of PreTeXt. And this is more or less equivalent to downloading the VS Code executable, like the text editor. I don't even know if I have that installed on this computer. I have never installed that on this computer because I always just use the web interface. And it installs PreTeXt software. There's other software that it has not installed that we're going to need, and I'll show you how to do that in a moment. But it's one of those other one-time things. In fact, for the purposes of the recording being nice, I'm going to come back to this later. I'm going to go ahead and do that extra step. So don't worry about this. I'll explain what I'm doing here in a moment. I just want to go ahead and start doing that so that it's baking in the background. So we'll come back to that in just a second. So ignore this terminal thing. There is no Jedi, whatever whatever the quote is. Not the droids you're looking for. That's it.
So let me make sure I got this right. The GitHub repository, the web page is kind of where you can see the output of all this stuff, and like you said, people can go and like suggest a typo change. But if I want to actually do any editing, I have to go into the code space.
Correct. You as the author, as the maintainer of this work, I recommend you do everything through your code space. Okay. Your readers. And we're trying to make this even easier so that like you can like right click and say go to GitHub, and it actually sends them to the right place on GitHub where they can make the change. For very, very minor tweaks that will or suggesting them to you, there's two things they could do. They could edit it through, like, they could go to source and main.ptx, and they could say, actually, I want to edit this and I want to make this my greatest, awesomest algebra book, and they could actually do it's a little bit different because I'm the owner right now, but it has options out here to say suggest this change, more or less.
Gotcha.
Even that's a little bit technical. So the other thing I recommend authors do who want to build a community around with their readers and get them involved in making their OER even better is use the issues. It's okay, I don't care about my edits being lost. They can open an issue, fix typo in title, and they can just write in plain text, hey, I noticed that greatest.
And that's better for even like larger suggested change, like you should move this example to the next section or something like that. Gotcha.
Yeah. And they can submit the issue there, and there's like a little message board that you could all use your GitHub accounts to talk to each other. And that's how I recommend as a community sort of feature to do this sort of work.
Okay. One more thing about the code space, just to make sure, is there ever any reason why I would have to open another one once I've done this process, or do I just keep going back to that one?
Keep going back to that one. In fact, you see it's running right here in the background. I'm pretty confident we're going to find out. If I close this out, all right, the code space is gone. If I reopen the code space before it gets shut down due to inactivity, and it's not because it was doing a thing as we saw, it's going to pick up right where I left off in terms of the work.
Yeah.
So I don't see that terminal that's doing some. Yeah, there it is though. I did a shortcut, but there's again, you're not going to mess with the terminal too much as a new user anyway. So I don't want to dwell on that too much. I'll explain how to get to that and do the one thing you will maybe do once you want to use a few of the advanced features, more advanced features, I should say. Good stuff. Good, very good clarifications, questions. Anything else I should talk about this time that's as a new author?
I think it's okay so far. Yeah.
Cool. Now, one thing I haven't done is made a book that I could, the output is not shared with the world. The source excuse me, the source, if I go make a new, I should close this. These are not useful. The source repository, that's been updated with my greatest demo algebra book. But the actual website, if I sent this link to somebody and they opened it, they would be asked to sign into GitHub, because the only person who has access to that is you, the owner of that code space. We don't want that. We want to actually share this book with our students or somebody, right? So that's where we need to go back to our code space. And I'm going to talk about building and deploying a little bit. So I'm pretty happy. Let me go ahead and just click if I refresh this, is this still working? Yeah. So I've still got my view server working, so I can still see my edits. And I'm ready for I think this is ready to share with my audience, the public audience, not just the source of it, but the actual produced web version. And so to do that, I need to do, first of all, I always like to do another build just to make sure that things are nice and ready. You can see it's thinking, all right, it's done. Good. I want to share my latest build with the world. All right. That is what's called deploy. Deploy to GitHub Pages. And so I click deploy to GitHub Pages, and that ran and it stopped. We probably need to have a little pop-up that confirms that it's done. But if I go back over here to my repository webpage, and if I refresh, we see it's kind of subtle. I'm going to talk to Oscar about this. Hopefully by the next video I record, this is too subtle. But if I were to do this, so here's something else. If anything ever happens, this is a good learning opportunity. If anything ever happens and you're not sure if it worked or if there was an error or you want more details, that's where I would use, instead of the down here PreTeXt, run PreTeXt command, there's this little green arrow up here that also says run PreTeXt. And this gives you those same commands, but it gives them to you in terminal mode. You could also do this down here. You just have to say run them in terminal mode. And then it kind of toggles between default and terminal mode. But I'm going to do the deploy in terminal mode because I think right now that's way more usable. And what that does is going to use PreTeXt deploy, and it's going to give you a bunch of things that happened. And it looks like, yeah, latest build successfully deployed, I probably should say, to GitHub. And now there's 3 links it gives you in the terminal version. And so those are all pretty important. I'm going to tell you is that, first of all, you may need to enable GitHub Pages. So it tells you the link to follow. And it looks like, oh, I don't have to enable it. It's already live at this link. If you did that too quickly, it may not be ready. So in which case you can go to your actions. That's the second link here. The actions sends you back to this page. In fact, I don't think it is ready. Oh, now it is though. So yeah, you saw that. You had blinked and you missed it. It was taking some time to build and deploy on GitHub side. It just takes a little bit of time for it to move the files and the bits around the cloud to the right place. It looks like it took 34 seconds. In fact, we can see half a minute. And when you get that green check mark, you know that deployment is finished. Back in my code space or back on the pages page, it gave me the link to your built project will be available to the public at this link. And if I open that link, now you see, instead of Stephen Klontz, obscure memory, whatever, instead, it's stephenklontz.github.io/demo migrates algebra book front matter. That is a link that if you share it with any rando on the internet, they will be able to see your built HTML.
So as a test of this, I've been following the steps. I just put in the chat a link to, I think, a public link. So if you click that and it opens up, I think that will be a good confirmation that I did the same steps correctly to make something public.
There you go. An introduction
Excellent.
to the math of voting methods, an example to get you started. Okay. It's working. Yay.
Yes.
Yes. And so this is that's the workflow right there. You write, you build locally, and when you get to a point, and I do believe that you will not be able to deploy by default if you have any of these outstanding source control changes. So if it's yelling at you to commit, to give you that save point, I'm pretty sure we can test it right now. I should give full credit, by the way. Oscar Levin, the author of Open Introduction to Discrete Mathematics, has heroic amount of work on the graphical user interface through VS Code that you're seeing right here. He and I are co-authors of the command line interface that you kind of got a glimpse of down here, but he's the one that's done all the work on the VS Code like graphical user interface, and it's making life so much easier for getting people started. So
Yeah.
thanks again to you, Oscar, if you watch this. Not that you need to, because you already know how to do it. But in any case, all that to say, I was talking about the buttons. What was the point of that? Before I started gushing about Oscar, it was
You had to commit something before getting the public link.
right. Oh, right. I was
Is
going
that
to
it?
test if I could deploy now, and so I'm going to try it down here with without the terminal. If I deploy, getting errors. So it does tell you that there's errors with the deploy. And this is another good example to show you. If it says show log, first of all, you can kind of go back and see what the heck happened. And then if you really want to dig in, or if you're getting support from us, we may ask you to run a command in terminal mode. And so if I deploy in terminal mode, it goes down here and it does the command line stuff, the PreTeXt deploy command line instruction for you. And you can kind of scroll and see these errors. You don't have to know what these errors mean so much. Although if you read them, either add and commit these changes with git or run PreTeXt deploy -u to have the changes updated automatically. Again, this is all assuming that it's not assuming that you're using VS Code necessarily. For us, anything that has to do with Git being stale or out of date, it's because of that one right here. We have one pending change that we need to commit. And so what did I actually change? I click the file. Oh yeah, it's not a change I really want to do. So I'm actually going to revert that. I'm going to discard that change. And now I should be able to deploy again. But if I really did want to make a change, an example to get you started with algebra, maybe it's an easy example to get you started with algebra. First of all, I have to rebuild it. Quick build. Refresh it over here on not the public version, but the local version. And if this happens like it happened now, that probably means that I spent too long doing other things. I haven't viewed it recently. PreTeXt view. Use the view command to view the web. And that got me a refreshed window. So now if I refresh, I can see it's an easy example to get you started with algebra. I rebuilt. I need to commit that change. Now that I like the way it's built, I'm going to change. Added easy qualifier. I don't know. I'm going to commit and sync that change. And finally, I'm going to deploy to GitHub Pages. And again, now I'm going to click the actions real quick because I want to show you that this, we said it takes half a minute, right? So on average, for this small book, at least, it takes about half a minute for it to go. And it's queued and in progress. So it really depends on how busy GitHub is. Because GitHub has, their servers, they can only do so much at one time. And, so it looks like it's queued up. If you're really nosy, you can click it. It looks like it's build, and now it's doing various random things. And again, I'm really impatient. I can click the deploy thing and it's completed. It even gives me the link right there. So
Should
now
I
we see
expect?
that. Go ahead.
Sorry. Should I expect a longer time on that step if I'm actually I've got a whole book to compile? Is that going to be more like a couple of minutes?
I would expect it to be a bit more of it's a bit of a linear sort of process. There's the building locally is more quadratic in terms of how much longer it takes because of the cross-referencing and of the book within itself. But yeah,
Right.
I've not timed this. It would actually be interesting. I could let me pause the recording just for a second.
Sure.
Okay, so here's an example of one of my major projects, the T-Based Inquiry Learning Calculus book. It's based on active calculus, which is a very famous PreTeXt book. And this book, I'll show you, just for the purpose of scale here. This activity book it's actually even bigger than this, but it has 9 chapters and it has, 4 to 9 sections per chapter, the actual deploy is only a minute and a half. So it's not even linear. It's more logarithmic, perhaps. So it is longer, but maybe not that much longer. The actual build process, though, back in your code space, when you hit PreTeXt build, that's like super snappy, as you saw. That will be a bit more of a quadratic. Like if it's twice as big of a document, it might take 4 times as long to build. There are mechanisms in order to build just little pieces of your book that's outside the scope of this video, because it's more about getting started. But as your book gets larger, if those build times get longer, I probably need to someday have like an intermediate tutorial to help folks with the little bits of tips and tricks that can help with larger sorts when the projects get a little bit larger. I don't want this video to run too long, so let me go ahead and perhaps first ask any questions up to this stage.
I think you've answered everything I've wondered about so far. Yeah.
Okay. So I think one of the big things is, and I'm glad I did this in the background, over here in the terminal, here I did a thing, all right, way back up here. In fact, it's even off the screen right now. I want to talk about assets. I want to talk about diagrams and pictures and how do I get those going, okay? Personally, I like to use Sage Math. And so I'm going to show you how I might add a Sage. Oh, first of all, if I want to do something fancy with PreTeXt, I am a pretty heavy user of PreTeXt, as you might guess. I don't have everything memorized 100%. What's my first go-to? Definitely the sample article is probably the best place in March 2023. If I go to examples at pretextbook.org, examples, not the showcase article, not the sample book, the sample article. And I'm going to go to the annotated sample article. And I don't know, we might need to make that a little bit more obvious, because I think that's really much the first go-to for anybody. And for example, I want to do a Sage plot. And so that I can search. First of all, PreTeXt is recent, like last 3 to 6 months search as part of PreTeXt books. Super helpful, even with searching the documentation and the examples for PreTeXt. And if I want to know how to plot something with Sage, well, I'm guessing, I have some compute integrals with Sage. I think I want a graphics. I think that's what I really want. Oh, here we are. I want two Sage plots on one set of axes. And if I view source, I see I got this beautiful PreTeXt sample that I can just copy and I can paste into my code space. So I'm going to copy and paste this here. I'm not, it's just a bunch of code that, it's like you learn LaTeX, right? Someone gave you something that works. You're going to paste it in, or you're going to open it up, and then you're going to tweak it and edit it until you figure out how to do. So I'll explain what actually happened here in a moment. But first thing I want to do is rebuild. Quick build. And I want to view the output. I've already viewing the output. Again, it's very easy to get confused if you don't look at your URL. This is the public URL. That's not the thing I'm actually editing right now. I'm going to close it out. It's this random gobbledygook github.dev URL that's going to be the thing I'm editing. And so if I refresh, I see nothing because I edited it in the section called section title. We get a section title. All right, this is what I expected. We do get a figure. It does have the caption 2 Sage plots on one set of axes, but it's broken. That is not obviously what we wanted to see. The reason why is because this is what we call a generated asset. Let me explain. So first of all, what actually did I paste in? Figure, caption. All right, that all worked out. Inside of the figure is a caption. Inside of the figure is an image. And it has a certain width that we want it to be, but it's a SagePlot image. SagePlot says this, I'm going to describe this image using Sage Math code. sagemath.org is a mathematics software system like, Mathematica, Maple, MATLAB, all that good stuff. But it's free open source. So a lot of people like to use that with their open source documents. And so we got this code here. And if I were to copy paste this code into an app such like sagecell.sagemath.org, and evaluate that using Sage, we see it's the right code. There was nothing wrong with that. But how do I get this picture over here? And I don't want to have to manually do this. There should be an automatic way of doing this. And that's where PreTeXt generate assets comes into play. PreTeXt generate assets. Anything like a Sage plot, which has to be generated because your web browser, the HTML, JavaScript, none of that, if you don't know much about the architecture of the web, just understand that there are certain types of code that your web browser can't do by default unless it's fancy like this. I don't want to go too deep in the weeds on this, but there are just certain types of assets like Sage plots, like LaTeX images. In fact, I'll go ahead and copy paste and make a LaTeX image. Which is something like begin TXT picture. So if you're familiar with LaTeX, you've probably done like this, draw a line from 0, 0 to 1, 1 in TXT picture. All right, I'm going to rebuild. And now, okay, broken. That's because copy pasted too much. And I have the same ID. I'm not sure I'm going to talk about IDs today, but just know that IDs should be unique. I'm just going to change these to 2 for now. I'm going to PreTeXt rebuild again. Build successful, refresh. Now we have 2 different figures, 1.1.1, 1.1.2, and dismiss all this. And now, again, I still haven't generated the assets. Let's generate the assets. Generate the assets. Now, if you followed me all along, this would not work. It would error out. The thing you have to do to generate assets for the first time, it's another one of those one-time deals, is double-click generate assets help. There is this sudo bash dev container post create command. You want to copy that and you want to paste that into your terminal. So if you don't have a terminal pulled up for whatever reason, you can go to this hamburger thing in the upper left, terminal, new terminal. Okay, it's going to look like this, your username, your workspace, $sign. Don't worry about it, just paste it in, hit enter, and that takes a while. And it won't take a while for me though, because I've already installed all this. This is the thing that took about 2 or 3 minutes in the background earlier. That's this tab up here. I already did all that. And so, God willing that nothing errored out while I was trying to talk and give a tutorial in the background, I'm going to be able to now hit PreTeXt, generate assets for web. Oh no. All right. So LaTeX compilation failed. So this is where, again, if you want to see, you could go to the log. This is the other example of where you don't want to do too much at one time. I did both a Sage plot and a LaTeX image at the same time. And also, I wrote that LaTeX image. I didn't copy paste it. I could very well have made an error in that code. I'm going to comment it out by hitting Control Tab. That's going to break because the double dash in LaTeX conflicts with the commenting of HTML. All right, I'm just going to delete it for now. I can undo that later. This is not a purposeful moral, but it is a natural moral that I am victim of myself. Don't do too much at one time. Frequently rebuild, frequently regenerate, and make sure that things work. If I regenerate now with PreTeXt, generate assets for web, it looks like it's in terminal mode right now. So if I do it, or it showed it up here anyway, get rid of that. I don't need that. It looks like it worked. If I refresh, after you generate, you also have to build. Maybe we should do a build automatically, but it is part of the process. Generate, then build. Now, if I refresh, there it is. If I don't like that it's so small, I'll make it 90%. Now, I've already generated this asset. This picture right here isn't going to change. And that's generating generally is slower than building. And so as long as you're not changing the actual asset, like the picture, you're just changing the stuff around it, like making it appear wider, making it have a different caption. Hi, Mom. Then all you have to do is rebuild. You don't have to regenerate the asset. Now, if you wanted this to be a green, let's say the lower one's green parabola, I change that and rebuild, that's not going to get updated because I changed the asset itself.
Hmm.
And so for the asset, I'm going to regenerate the asset for web. Again, you see it takes a moment, or we don't have the pop-up for it. So I'm going to do it in terminal mode just to see. Maybe it's because I hid my terminal output. Interesting. Let's just go ahead and refresh. Did it work? No, it didn't. Okay, one more try. PreTeXt, in terminal mode, generate assets for web.
So one of the little morals here, though, is that
Yeah,
if you change the asset, you have to remember to generate again. It's not going to give me an error message about that, right?
exactly right.
Okay.
And I may have found a bug because, hey, free open source software. I'm going to pause the recording just for a second.
Yeah.
All right, I just realized the issue. I forgot my own rule. After you generate, always rebuild. So for example, I changed it to red and I generated for web. And unfortunately, you can see it's spinning and it's
Mhm.
done. We need to add, like we do for builds, the kind of reminder that, hey, it worked. And but if I refresh it over here, I changed it back from green to red, which I did off recording. It's because I didn't rebuild. Quick build. The quick build is for web by default. I can view the output. I can just refresh over here. It's back to red. So for changing assets that are generated, you regenerate and you rebuild. If you just want to change the stuff around your assets, the actual document, the words, that's usually just a build.
Gotcha.
All right. And of course, what if I want to share this with the whole entire world? Well, I better commit the changes. I added a plot, commit and sync. That's no longer yelling at me in source control. So now I can go to my PreTeXt, deploy to GitHub Pages, and it finished running. And now if I go back to my repository, if I refresh, you can even see it. So you got to go through your actions. Go through your actions. You can see it's thinking about it. Again, it's building. It'll do this, whatever all this stuff does. I actually don't know exactly the stack that GitHub uses to magic my whisk off my HTML off to the right corner of the internet so it can be shared with the world. But I'm glad they do it for me magically and for free. And so eventually it's going to be done deploying. And when it's done deploying, I know that this figure that I added in my GitHub code space, that github.dev thing, now can be shared with the world.
And just to quickly clarify again, if I made my repository private, still this thing that you just deployed right now, that's still a public link that I could share, right?
I believe that's a feature of pro accounts, which you get with the educator
Ah,
benefits.
gotcha. Okay.
I'm not 100% certain, but you know what? We can test it out. At the very bottom, in the danger zone, at the bottom of the general settings, in the danger zone, I wasn't kidding, you could change the
Oh,
visibility
I see.
to private or back to public. I want to make it private. It's going to tell you that it's going to screw up any community you've built around your repository. I
Yeah.
highly recommend folks that want to embrace OER to, I mean, eventually you should make it public, right? I think it's best to start from the beginning, but I understand some people are more private than I am, I guess. Anyway, I have read and understood these effects. I understand this. It's destructive. I did it. Okay. Now, here's the question. If I go to pages, is it still working? Caution, this repository is private, but the published site will be public. That's exactly what you wanted. So for
Yeah.
early versions of your book, I'm willing to concede that you may want to have a public deployment of your work, even though now if I go to this private repository and I go to it in incognito mode, it'll even pretend it doesn't exist. Like it's a 404 error. Like it's not a web page that exists. More Star Wars references. Okay. Yeah. So, but you still have your you can share this with your students. The output of your work is still public.
Yeah, that could be a way to potentially share like a draft version, but not allow any like commenting on the source and stuff like that. Okay.
Absolutely right. Again, I am a huge believer in
Yeah.
it's better to err, unless you have a reason to be private, you should be public, especially for support, especially if you're watching this and going, oh, I can do this. And then you realize that I could only talk about so much in an hour. That there's something else you knew you want to learn. You just can't find it in the pages upon pages of documentation that we have. It's much easier if you want to get support. Let's talk about support. First of all, I'm going to make it public. It's going to tell me, I understand what's happening here. I made it public. Okay. Now if I go back to this in incognito mode, again, I returned it to the public web. And now if I want to get help with my project, I'm going to copy this github.com link /my username /that. And I'm going to go to one of my favorite websites, groups.google.com. Forget that. You're not going to type that out. You're going to go to pretextbook.org, or you're going to search for this through Google. But if you go to, oh, don't tell me. I know where it is. Oh, it's right here on the front page, community, PreTeXt support. And I'm already joined. I'm already logged in. You don't have to be logged in to read, but you have to join with a Google enabled account to log in. A new conversation. Help. Here's my repo. Fix it. I'm not actually going to post that, but when you share this link with me, I can immediately pull this up. I can go to code and I can create a code space if I'm signed in, and I can see exactly what you're doing at any given time. And I can see your source exactly as you're using it, as long as in your code space, your source control is up to date. There's nothing that you've edited that you haven't shared with the world. But this is so much easier for me as someone who does a lot of support on this forum. If you try to tell me and you only even if you copy paste the code, say my title page doesn't look right. Well, it might be something completely on a different part of the file because these things are all interconnected, right? And so it's much, much, much easier for us to help you if you have the public repository or you share it with us individually. You just have to take some time to do that. Let me show you how to do that real quick. Not that I'm encouraging it, but hey, if you ever want to share a private repository, go to the settings, go to collaborators. You could add people. Just you have to know their username or their email to add them. So if I want to add Rob Beezer, there he is. He's the creator of PreTeXt. I could add him as a collaborator. So there it is. All right, this is getting to be about an hour of video, so maybe this is a good time for some quick fire questions or anything obvious that I haven't talked about in terms of getting started, getting productive. As a new author, Brendan, what are you thinking?
Well, I'm just joining that group right now.
Hey,
I also ran that. I had copied and pasted that terminal command. Is that the kind of thing that just like sets up all the infrastructure so that you can generate assets later, and I don't have to worry about what it does?
yes.
Okay.
So the one-time things that we've done today was go to PreTeXt code space and created the first repository. Yeah. And then the second one-time thing we did was create the code space on that repository. The last one-time thing we did was within our code space is we went to generate assets help, copied this magical incantation. Someday we need a button for this. We don't have it as of this recording. We opened a terminal, we pasted it in and hit enter, and it installed LaTeX, it installed GhostScript, it installed PDF to SVG, SageMath, a bunch of things that people often like to use, but they anyway, it takes about 2 or 3 minutes the first time you do it. This time it just told me, hey, dummy, you've already done all this. So why'd you waste my time and yours?
And then once that's done, I don't have to do that again.
You don't have to do it again. I mean, every time I do it, it's just telling me it's already done. It literally took a computer on the cloud and installed that software to that computer. And just like you don't have to install Chrome on your laptop every time you want to use it, you don't have to install those extra like I said, we don't do this by default simply because we want people to get started without having to wait 5 minutes, right?
Yeah.
This way that you can start in like 1 or 2 minutes, and then when you're like, oh, I want to start drawing my diagrams, and this might change if we're watching this in the future, we may decide that no, it's worth the extra 2 minutes to just go ahead and install it all up front. But as of this recording, that's our compromise, is that you can do a bunch of the basic stuff. Oh, I still haven't done one of our learning outcomes, which is how do I turn this into LaTeX? One of the very important things is that you're not just creating a website, you're also creating LaTeX that can be converted into PDF.
Yeah.
And so that's as simple as going to my project, PreTeXt. Don't do a quick build, do a build of print or print LaTeX. Let's do print LaTeX first. Build successful. All right. Well, first of all, where are these files actually going? If you see there's this little grayed out output thing, it doesn't show up in the public repository at all because it's grayed out here. It's called get ignored. That's just because maybe you just want that tech file and just want to download it. It won't do too much by itself unless you have the whole folder though. So let's download the whole folder. And now it's going to download the folder. I think this may not actually work. Let's see. Yeah, don't that has not been very successful for me to download a whole folder currently from here. So you can just by hand, there's not a great way of doing this at the moment. But if you want to see, here's the tech that we produce. It just doesn't have all the supporting like image files. This is not tech you ever want to author by hand or edit by hand, but it's what you need to produce a PDF. Now, really, you want to do the PDF like magic. And one of the things that Generate Assets Help does is install LaTeX, the software LaTeX. And so I should, crossing my fingers because this was buggy recently, but I should be able to build just regular print. It's running PreTeXt and it's okay. I'm going to view the output. Oh, yeah, that didn't work. Okay. What happened? That's fun. What happened? I'll restart the code space, see if that fixes it. That was fun. Free and open source software. If I didn't mention it before.
Always an adventure.
Always an adventure, but I'll tell you what. The most powerful thing about PreTeXt is not the software. Sorry, Rob, if you're watching this, you don't need to. You know how to write PreTeXt. You wrote it yourself. You create it yourself. But it's not really not the software. It's the community. It's the community, and it's the support that we give one another and our common dedication to producing better open source, not just open access. A lot of people don't understand the distinction, but open source textbooks that we can. That you're not committed to any sort of like OpenStax or LibreText or any sort of like owner of who's going to be the primary person to serve and deliver your content. We use GitHub because it is very, very easy to export and redeploy to other solutions. If GitHub is not the best way to write PreTeXt in a month from now, we can very easily do what's called a git pull and a git push to Bitbucket or GitLab or any of these other solutions that also use Git. And it's just, it gives you as an author a flexibility that no other solution is going to give you at the expense of it's a little bit more technical, as one might expect. But because of the community and because of the tools that especially Oscar have created, it's not that bad. All that to say, did I actually produce a PDF? Print main.pdf that I can download, that I can open, and now we can see my greatest algebra book is in PDF format. Sort of. There was a bug in it. There must have been a bug in my code somewhere because it stopped at the table of contents. So again, for the purpose of recording, let me pause just for a second in case this takes longer to debug. Okay, first things first, remember your question that you set off recording, but before I answer that question, I know what went wrong. So again, anytime something goes wrong, it's always good to run the command in terminal mode. And again, I'm going to try to build the print in terminal mode. And again, this is awful tech, build code output. But if you scroll up a little bit, usually if it errors, it shows up towards the end, and you see this LaTeX warning, it can't find my Sage plot. And the reason why is that when I generated it for web. I did not generate it for print. I need to generate assets for print, because what's happening is it's going over here and generated assets. And this is a Sage plot. When I generated it for web, it made this little SVG. Now that I'm generating it for print, God willing, if it works, it's going to create a PDF version. There we are. Now, if I PreTeXt build print, build was successful. I'm going to go to, okay, and then answer your earlier question. If you ever want to see something that you've generated or you built, generated stuff lives in generated assets. Built stuff lives in output. And so I built a print PDF. I'm going to download that PDF. I'm going to open that PDF. And sure enough, there's my first chapter. There's my first section. There's my Sage plot. And yeah, this book was authored in PreTeXt. That doesn't work anymore because I'm not no longer viewing. Oh well. Okay. Any case, if I want to see that HTML version, I'm just gonna view the web again. There we go. All right. Man, what do you think? Thoughts or questions?
I think I'm ready to jump in and write, really.
And I didn't pay him to say that, folks. So yeah, I'm glad that was what I hoped would come out of this tutorial. And if you're watching this, I mean, well, I don't need to say that. I'll talk off the recording for that. So anything else you think I should put on the record, though? There is something I know I need to say. If you want help, I told you guys about PreTeXt support. Let me turn off the screen share. If you need help with PreTeXt stuff, I told you about the PreTeXt support forum. The other place to get help is in our weekly Zooms. If you go to, in fact, I will share my screen again because I should show you this website, pros.runestone.academy. Right now, this is the reason why I'm able to do these videos is through the support of the National Science Foundation. This is a good Bill Nye sign off, right? This video is brought to you by the National Science Foundation and viewers like you. And seriously, they've been very supportive of us by giving us the funding and time to really build out the community aspects of PreTeXt and Runestone. I didn't talk about Runestone today, but it's a courseware that uses PreTeXt as the language to describe its content. We have lots of events that we have going on. Upcoming events are down here currently in our calendar. You can see all these virtual drop-ins. PreTeXt development, the instructor author circle. That's where I'm going to push people towards initially. If you're first getting involved in the community, you're probably a beginning instructor or author. That's a great place on Mondays and Wednesdays for you to come and talk with the community to get answers to the questions. And in fact, my local time is almost 2 o'clock Central. So it's about time for our 3 p.m. Friday, that's where I'm headed to. And the link for that is pros.runestone.academy/drop-in. You go there, it's going to open a Zoom link automatically. I'm not going to do that because it would break this recording and send me off to another meeting. But almost daily, almost every weekday, there is some Zoom opportunity for you to hop in and say hello and introduce yourself to the community, or just lurk and chat and just listen and learn from everybody else who's talking about how they're using PreTeXt Runestone solutions, how they're writing stuff in it. We have our community. If I could find the right tab, all right, I'll just reopen it. Pros.runestone.academy. Our community is very vast. Students, instructors, researchers, and authors. We have a bunch of different things going on, and we're trying to serve everyone. I am sounding like a martyr because that's what I am in a certain sense. But seriously, a lot of the different open educations people ecosystems are not focused on the entire pipeline from student to not student instructors that tend to get a lot of attention from these folks. Authors and researchers, not so much in many cases. And we are really trying to build a community that serves the entire, and developers. Developers should be somewhere in this picture. Maybe I'll put us up in here in the corner. We created the software to make this happen. And if you are a student, instructor, author, researcher, or developer, we want you to be a part of our community. If you are dedicated to free, accessible, interactive, open source documents, you have a home here with PreTeXt and Runestone. So with that, I will sign off. Thank you guys for watching. Brendan, thank you so much for helping me, keeping me honest on this call. And I'll see y'all when I record this video and hope probably another couple months with a bunch of new features. So see you then.